Hello everyone, my name is Meghan LeVota and I'm an ENFJ. If you didn't already know, about 9 months ago I did a series where I explained what my opinion was of each personality type. Now I know I'm not speaking for all ENFJs, but hopefully those of you watching this can glean something about how your type might interact with the FE and NI, the functions that I have as an ENFJ. My ENTP video that I made was a little bit long and I got a comment that was like, hey, you should redo this and make it shorter since ENTPs have a short attention span. And I think that that's a great idea because I definitely admit that I went a little overboard with the disclaimers in the last video. So I've already been talking for 44 seconds. I'm gonna just jump right into it, okay? Anyway, so what do I think about ENTPs? I've said before that I have a love-hate relationship with INTPs where it kind of depends who they are, whether or not we're gonna get along really, really well or really, really badly, and kind of really depends on their values. ENTPs are similar, but I would say that like the intensity of the love and hate is a little bit less. So I'm either gonna get along with them quite well or not really like them, which, as you can see, like I said, the INTP is like, oh my god, favorite person ever, or oh my god, you're the bane of my existence. Imagine like this, and then ENTPs are kind of like here. And it is because, like all NTPs, it really depends on whether or not you give a crap about being respectful. Whenever ENTPs tend to be a lot better at this than INTPs, which can really facilitate the conversation. I really just admire ENTPs for their ability to always come up with new ideas, and for me personally, which I'm not sure is necessarily an ENFJ thing, but personally I really care about curiosity, and I really vibe with people who are curious, and if you're not curious, then I'm probably not gonna really care what you have to say. And so the majority of ENTPs are very, very curious, and they listen before they talk. You might think that they talk a lot, or they might, be kind of blunt about some things, but for the most part, ENTPs listen before they talk, which I really appreciate. They don't just go right in with their judgment. They still have that thing where they have very quick-witted opinions, which sometimes they can get a little ahead of me before I even have gotten the chance to share my whole opinion out. They can sort of get ahead of themselves and sometimes misinterpret a little bit of what I'm saying, which is just, that's like a common NE and NI miscommunication, where NE is just on to idea to idea to idea, where my NI is really just trying to go deep into one idea before I move on to the next. And so that can sort of be a disconnect. But for the most part, especially ENTP women, I get along with really, really well. I actually have quite a few ENTP female friends that like originally thought that they might have been a feeler because they didn't relate with a lot of the NTPs on the internet, which my theory about that is that women are socialized to care about people's feelings, and if they don't, to at least seem like they do. And anyone who uses FE, no matter where it is on your stack, is going to be pretty susceptible to social conditioning. So I've found that female ENTPs are actually quite warm and incredibly charismatic. And I said in my last video that I talked about ENTPs, I've sort of noticed this dynamic where ENTPs are the sort of people where they're like making fart jokes or whatever, like with their friends, and then the moment that an adult walks in the room, or like their boss or like their mom, they're like the sweetest person ever, like, hello Mr. and Mrs. Smith, how are you doing? And like they could just put on this charm, and it's not like that it's fake or anything, but I do think it's quite funny how they can sort of have this troll-like behavior, but then like turn on the charm and do like what is so-called the right behavior when need be. And so they could be kind of chameleons in this way. And so I really appreciate how ENTPs are always free thinkers. And they are not really trapped down by, what society expects from them to think. But sometimes, though, they have this thing where they want to exert themselves as a free thinker or as an individual so much that they're really just arguing just to argue. At least that's how it seems like to me. Now, I know that this isn't always the case, because one thing I have realized about ENTPs is that whenever they're playing devil's advocate, they're doing so because they want to refine their own opinions and because they really want to explore an idea with the other person, and they really seem to recognize that you have to know all sides and all angles to the situation to really have a view. And that's a little different than how I operate, because I will put my perspective together based on what I've observed, and then I will explore other perspectives, which that ENTPs, they tend to believe, from my experience and my knowledge of the functions, they tend to really believe that you can't really have an opinion unless you have looked at it from all angles, where that's sort of a very extroverted intuition thing to think, because as an introverted intuitive, I sort of look at things that just, that rings true, that is true. It feels true. I get the light bulbs going off. Like, I know that it's true. And that sort of, I have gotten in some arguments with ENTPs because of that don't really like the way I come off in arguments, because I might seem really, like, sure of myself or arrogant or things like that, when really that's just, like, the nature of NE and NI and how it works and how it comes to its conclusions. And since I have inferior TI, I'm going to be, like, okay, as an FE dominant, like, I'm going to want to sort of shift how I act based on who I'm talking to. And so I really bring out my TI when I'm talking to ENTPs, probably because I'm trying to keep up or something, which might not work well for them, because they'll, like, see through, like, the parts of my argument that I haven't thought fully about. But it doesn't necessarily mean that my perspective isn't true. It just means that I don't really think that much about piecing together an argument before I open my mouth, because I'm not really trying to convince anyone. I don't really care about arguing. That's not true. Actually, well, I don't know. I dated an ENTP once that told me, like, oh, bullshit, you love arguing. You love arguing. I'm like, no, I don't. And then they were like, well, you're arguing right now. So I don't know. Maybe I do like arguing. I do like having, like, fruitful discussions where I come to a new conclusion. But sometimes what bugs me about some ENTPs is that it seems like they're attacking me if I have, like, a different opinion, when for me, my style of debate, I suppose, is more about, tell me about your perspective. How did you get to that conclusion? Oh, well, I got to my perspective because of this conclusion. Where ENTPs sometimes, it's just sort of like that whole idea of the marketplace of ideas. It's just like, the best idea will win. Let's just throw all these facts out there and let's just talk about it. And it's like a fun brain exercise to do that. And for the ENTPs watching this, if you have an ENFJ in your life, it is quite likely that they just don't enjoy that sort of banter as much as you. And they might be just waving the white flag, not because you're right, but because they're done. Like, their mind is exhausted. Like, with inferior TI, it actually hurts to use my brain too much in that way. But I really admire that about ENTPs. I actually think that a lot of ENTPs are kind of what the world needs for really idealistic change. Okay, what am I trying to say? So I'm, like, a very bleeding heart activist in a lot of ways, and no matter what beliefs you have, I feel like ENTPs, their skill set is really great for creating wide sweeping change, because they're able to take their emotions out of it, yet still be very charismatic and sort of pull at the heartstrings of people. And they have FE, and so they're still caring about harmony and about, like, world peace to an extent, but they aren't going to get like super triggered or emotional whenever they're expressing it, which for me, this is something I struggle with whenever I'm trying to present my ideas as an ENFJ. Like, sometimes I can feel personally offended if somebody disagrees with me or if someone's not seeing the perspective I want them to see. But ENTPs have this sort of relentless energy to them when they are conveying their point, where, I don't know, like, they're able to sort of fight for harmony and world peace, but without putting themselves in it, which is kind of a really cool thing. I've found that most ENTPs, like, even though they're thinkers, like, they might like come off as an asshole to some people, but they always have really good, a really like righteous intent. And I think it's something about TI and FE being together in the middle. Like, everything that they do, they seem to have a real reason for why they're doing it and always want the best in the situation. ENTPs can be kind of self-deprecating sometimes, which honestly could be annoying to be around sometimes when people are too self-deprecating, because ENTPs have an introverted feeling blind spot, which means that sometimes they struggle with knowing what exactly they feel in that moment, and they can sort of get into denial and be like, no, I don't feel that, I'm fine, when they clearly aren't fine. And if you're listening to this and you're an ENTP, you might be like, no, but I really was fine. Okay, well, as an ENFJ, I can sort of pick emotions off of people that might be subconscious. And so perhaps you don't think that you felt that anyway, but I'm still picking up on it for some reason. And so sometimes that indicates that there is something going on there. And a lot of times ENTPs, they will brush things off as a joke and pretend like everything's fine when it's clearly not fine, and their actions indicate that it's not fine. And it's sometimes annoying to deal with when the ENTP will not acknowledge that it's not fine, because if you're watching this and you resonate with this, the only way to feel better is to acknowledge that you're not fine, accept it, and then move on. Like, I'm not saying that you need to wallow in your emotions and be like a feeler type, because you're not a feeler type, but it will be a lot more beneficial for you in your relations with people and, you know, moving up the business ladder or whatever you're trying to do, if you just acknowledge the times when you're not fine, because perhaps people can tell when you're not fine. Perhaps it is indicated in your actions. And this is something that I think ENTPs can work on. And a lot of them, I would say, don't have the healthiest coping mechanisms, where they will sort of escape their problems by watching a lot of TV or being on the internet a lot. And if you're an ENTP that is wanting to grow, like, I'm gonna say something, you could take it or leave it. You don't have to agree with me here. I just would recommend to start to notice the times whenever you feel like you are escaping your emotion, whether the Netflix button keeps coming on and being like, are you still watching, or whatever, or whenever you sort of find yourself trying to look for tells of what behavior you do to escape something. ENTPs seem to kind of escape their emotions, like I said, like with watching too much TV, or maybe even reading too many books, or maybe even like going out and drinking too much. And in my experience, ENTPs, they don't even really enjoy going out and like getting drunk necessarily, but they can do it as a distraction. ENTPs seem to prefer having deep one-on-one talks or like challenging discussions with people, which is why I get along with them quite well. Like, I knew a lot of them in college. We were in a lot of the same circles. Like, as an ENFJ, I really appreciate talking to ENTPs, because I think that there is a piece of them that they really do get me in a way that not any other type besides ENFJ can get, because ENFJs and ENTPs are both really outspoken extroverts that care about issues. And sure, you could say that any extrovert could be that way, or maybe even ENTJs could be that way, but it's the ENTP and the ENFJ types that are going to be likely to be really, I guess, outspoken and passionate about causes that they believe in. And whenever I meet an ENTP that is that way and we have similar beliefs, then we're going to get along quite well. The only annoying parts about some ENTPs for me is whenever they pretend like they don't have emotions and they just accidentally slap their emotions onto everybody else around them because they're just not aware that that's what they're doing. Or when they are so self-deprecating and so stubborn and unwilling to accept help from anyone else. And really, yeah, whenever you just are not willing to admit that your bad mood might be rubbing off on other people, that's really about it. And, you know, I'm talking kind of theoretically here. Like, I haven't really had a real issue with an ENTP, but I know that is how some ENTPs act. And for the most part, I think that they're really, really funny most of the time, and really, really, really interesting people, and types that I like to have around as friends. But, okay, one more thing actually I realized is that there's been lots of people in my life, whether from middle school or like high school. I looked back at some of my yearbooks and I had this theme of a lot of people writing in my yearbook saying, I used to hate you, but now I really like you. Which is really funny, and I'm almost positive that, okay, when I say a lot of people, I could say maybe 4 people have said that. But 4 people have said that, and they were all ENTPs. And I guarantee you there are some ENTPs that did not say those words to me, but that definitely felt that way about me. And I think that it is because a lot of times ENTPs judge extroverted feeling when they see it. They might see it as vapid, they might see it as fake, they might see it as insincere, but then when they get to know me, they realize that I'm sincere, then we can get along. But I think that sometimes, since ENTPs use introverted sensing, they are sort of going off their past experience as opposed to looking at the person as an individual. And sometimes I maybe remind them of somebody else who is fake because I'm using FE, because I'm being like, hey, how are you? Nice to meet you. How's your life going? And they just don't trust that. Or they don't trust people who are smiling. Or they don't trust people who seem friendly. And so that's another thing that could happen with ENTPs. But anyway, this video was still kind of long, but I think I was more concise, and maybe I got to the point more. So hopefully you liked this. If there are any other types watching this below that would like me to redo their video or want me to talk more about something else, please let me know. And if you're watching this, please, if you are interested, I will link below. Join my Facebook group, Personality Typology for Self-Growth. We talk a lot about self-growth and the cognitive functions in that group, and I'd love to have you. All right, well, have a wonderful day.